Elena sat beside her 15-year-old brother, Prince William, in the throne room, both listening as the council debated the kingdom's troubles. Of late, their father had begun involving her in such meetings. Though the throne would one day pass to William, the king believed Elena needed to be politically savvy to support her brother, especially as his declining health loomed over them all. Another village has been raided, Lord Rowan announced, unfurling a map. The third in as many weeks. The room erupted into debate. Some lords demanded increased patrols, while others pushed for heavier taxes to fund the army. We cannot forget Eldenwood, Rowan pressed. Rowan's rebellion is a growing threat to stability. Elena glanced at her father, whose weariness showed in every word. Arundel's coffers are strained. We must prioritize defending the most vulnerable, he said heavily. As the council argued, William leaned toward Elena and whispered, "The lords debate endlessly, but they don't hear the people. Someone needs to." His words planted a seed in her mind. That night, dressed in plain clothing, Elena slipped beyond the palace walls. For the first time, she saw the capital's stark contrasts, polished streets giving way to narrow alleys and crumbling homes. In the marketplace, she overheard villagers speaking bitterly. "The crown taxes us into starvation," one man said, "but where are the soldiers when we're attacked? Eldenwood's rebels may be traitors, but at least they fight for us." Elena's chest tightened. These were her father's people, yet they spoke with anger and distrust. Rowan sat in the shadows of his cell, his mind racing. The council's decision had been clear. His defiance would not go unpunished. The sentence would likely come within days, imprisonment, execution, or worse. Yet, he couldn't shake the image of Princess Elena standing before him, her curiosity cutting through the iron bars of her privilege. She was nothing like he'd expected. The clanging of the dungeon doors interrupted his thoughts. A figure slipped inside, cloaked and hooded. It was Elena. "Princess," Rowan said, rising to his feet. "Back so soon?" She stepped closer, her face illuminated by the faint torchlight. "You were right," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The crown is failing its people." Rowan's surprise quickly gave way to suspicion. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't think my father will listen to me," she said, her voice steady. "But you might be able to make him listen. If you escaped, if you confronted him with proof of what's happening, maybe things could change." Rowan studied her, searching for any trace of deceit. "You're asking me to trust you?" "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "I'm asking you to trust that I care about this kingdom as much as you do." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elena reached into her cloak, producing a small iron key. "Will you promise to leave peacefully?" she asked. Rowan's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You have my word, princess." The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder. Elena's eyes widened. "Go," she urged, unlocking his chains. Rowan didn't hesitate. Grasping her hand briefly in silent thanks, he slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Elena leaned against the cold stone wall of the dungeon, her heart pounding as Rowan disappeared into the dark corridor. She had just freed a man branded a traitor. If discovered, she risked her ruin, and Rowan's death if recaptured. The sound of approaching guards made her tense. Just as she turned to leave, a strong hand grabbed her wrist, pulling her into the shadows. "Rowan, what's your plan for sneaking back, princess?" he murmured, his smirk faint in the dim light. Her flushed silence was answer enough. "Follow me," he said. "I know a way out." Reluctantly, she nodded, letting him guide her through secret passages that twisted deeper into the palace. The air was damp and cold, the torchlight dimming with every step. "You've done this before," she said quietly, more an accusation than a question. "Every noble has their secrets," Rowan replied flatly. "Your palace isn't as secure as your father thinks." At last, they emerged into the night air. The city sprawled before them, cloaked in moonlight. Rowan scanned the horizon. "We need to keep moving. By morning, they'll know I'm gone." "I can't go with you," Elena whispered. "You can't go back either," he countered sharply. "Do you think your father will forgive you for freeing me?" Her chest tightened at the truth of his words. "Come to Eldenwood," Rowan pressed. "You want to see the truth about this kingdom, don't you? Then come and see it for yourself." Elena hesitated, torn between loyalty to her family and the part of her that longed for answers. She thought of the villagers' whispers, their despair. Finally, she whispered, "I'll come. But that doesn't mean I agree with you." "That's fair," Rowan said, turning toward the forest. With one last glance at the palace, Elena followed him into the shadows. The first 2 days in the forest were grueling. Rowan set a relentless pace, and Elena struggled to keep up. Her cloak was soaked, her boots caked in mud, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. Rowan, in contrast, moved effortlessly, rarely speaking except to warn her of nearby patrols. By the 3rd day, her frustration boiled over. "Do you even have a plan?" she snapped as they crouched by a stream to drink. "We're avoiding your father's patrols," he replied calmly. "The roads are dangerous. And when we reach Eldenwood, what then?" she pressed. "You'll see people fighting to survive," he said simply. "Not rebels. Just people your father's court has ignored." She wanted to argue, to defend her family, but her words faltered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rowan froze, his hand raised to stop her. "What is it?" she whispered. The faint sound of hoofbeats reached her ears. A group of riders emerged from the trees ahead. Her heart stopped, fearing soldiers, but Rowan relaxed slightly. "My men," he said. The riders approached swiftly, their leader dismounting with a bow. "We've been tracking you since we heard of your capture, my lord." Rowan nodded. "You've done well. We'll need your horses to reach Eldenwood quickly." The leader glanced at Elena, his curiosity evident. "And hers? She's coming with us," Rowan said firmly. One of the men handed her the reins of a mare. As she mounted, the weight of her situation sank in. Riding with Rowan's men, she was now undeniably tied to his rebellion. The remainder of the journey passed in tense silence. When they finally emerged from the forest, Eldenwood loomed ahead, a stronghold built of dark stone, its fires flickering against the twilight. At the gate, Rowan's second-in-command, Kalen, greeted them with a mix of relief and surprise. "You're late," he said. Rowan smirked faintly. "We ran into some complications." Kalen's gaze shifted to Elena. "And she's part of those complications?" "She's with me," Rowan said simply. As they entered the stronghold, Elena felt the weight of her decision settle fully on her shoulders. She was far from the palace, from her family, and from everything she'd ever known. Eldenwood was alive with purpose. Soldiers trained in the courtyards, smiths hammered steel, and couriers rushed about with urgent messages. Though her quarters were modest, Elena couldn't rest. From her window, she watched Rowan crossing the courtyard below, flanked by his closest advisors. They entered a large stone building near the center of the stronghold. Curiosity gnawed at her. She had traveled this far with Rowan, but she still didn't understand the full scope of his plans. Slipping out of her quarters, she made her way toward the building, keeping to the shadows. She crouched by a narrow window, straining to hear the voices inside. "We've fortified Eldenwood enough to withstand an attack," a gravelly voice said. "But holding isn't enough," another argued. "We need to push forward and strike the capital. The people are ready for change." Elena's stomach twisted. Rowan's calm voice cut through the debate. "The capital won't fall easily. Bertram still has loyalists. We need to offer the people a better future before they'll stand with us." "And the royal family?" someone asked. "What happens to them when the capital is ours?" There was a heavy pause. Then Rowan spoke, his tone measured. "The king must be removed." Elena's breath caught. "What about the others?" another pressed. "His brother? His children? Leaving them alive risks revolt." Rowan hesitated. "I'll decide their fates when the time comes. This isn't about revenge, it's about survival. If sacrifices are necessary, so be it." Elena's chest tightened as she backed away from the window, her hands shaking. She could hardly process what she had heard. That night, Rowan came to her quarters. His expression was unreadable. "I did not take you to be a power-hungry usurper, Lord Rowan," she sneered. "You weren't supposed to hear that." he said quietly. She glared at him, her voice trembling with anger. So it's true? You plan to execute my father and my brother? This isn't personal, Rowan said, his jaw tightening. Your father's rule is failing. If we leave the old regime in place, nothing will change. And my brother, she demanded. He's just a boy. Rowan's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary. Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. You're no better than the tyrants you claim to fight against. He didn't respond, his confidence wavering for the first time. The stakes are high. Would Rowan be a ruthless liberator? Stay tuned for the next part of this series. Please like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss an update.